Hey everyone, I'm Matt Young.
And I am Michael Stewart Webb.
And we are the Webb & Young Group with Remax Hallmark Che Realty, and this is the Real Estate Roundtable. So buying a horse property isn't the same as buying a rural property, and it's definitely not the same as buying in town.
No, and this is where we see a lot of people making very expensive mistakes. People fall in love with the look of the property, the barn, the land, the setting, but they don't always understand what actually makes a property function well for horses. And this is where experience really matters. I've been around horses my entire life, and I own my own horse farm, and I have worked with equestrian properties all across Ontario. What I can tell you is this: a property can look perfect on the surface and still be completely wrong from a practical standpoint. So today, I want to walk through the key things you need to understand before you buy an equestrian property, because getting this right up front can save you tens of thousands of dollars and a lot of frustration.
For sure, and I think that's the big thing people miss. They see the lifestyle first, but not necessarily the infrastructure behind it. So where do you usually start when evaluating whether a horse property actually works?
That's a really great question. And the first thing we always need to look at is zoning. Not every property allows for livestock, and not every property that allows livestock allows for horses specifically, or in the numbers that you may want to keep. You need to confirm things like, are horses permitted? If so, how many? Are there restrictions on boarding, training, or operating a business? Because if your long-term plan is to board horses or run a small operation, zoning will either support that or shut it down completely.
So even before you start talking about barns or paddocks, you really need to make sure that the property can legally support what you want to do. Once zoning checks out, what's the next thing that you look at, Michael?
Well, next, and this is a very big one, drainage. Horses and water do not mix well when it comes to footing and overall health. If your paddocks, run-in areas, or barn entrances hold water, you're going to be dealing with things like poor footings or persistent mud issues. Chronically wet conditions can lead to everything from thrush and mud fever to abscesses, white line disease, pastern dermatitis, and even soft tissue strain from unstable footing. Increased maintenance, drainage, and pasture management are also costs that you would need to consider. Good equestrian properties are built with good drainage in mind. Grading, footing, and runoff, they all matter. If you walk the property and the property feels wet underfoot, there's a red flag.
And drainage is one of those things buyers might not even notice during a showing, especially if it's dry outside. Another thing I know gets overlooked a lot is manure management and environmental considerations.
That's right. One area that often gets overlooked is nutrient management. If you have multiple horses, manure management becomes a real consideration, not only from a practical standpoint, but also from a regulatory standpoint. Depending on the property and how it's used, there may be environmental guidelines around things like storage, runoff, and proximity to water sources. Even if you're not operating commercially, you still have to plan for handling waste properly.
And that's probably something a lot of buyers don't even think about until after they move in. Another major piece, and probably one of the most important for horses, is water.
That is a really good point. Water is one of the most critical and most underestimated components of any horse property. Horses drink a lot of water, between 20 and 55 liters each day. That's roughly 5 to 15 gallons each day per animal. So we're always looking at two things: quality and quantity. Does the well produce enough water to support multiple horses and the household? And is the water safe for both the people and the animals? If the water isn't safe for your consumption, then it's not safe for your horses either.
So it's not just about having water, it's whether the system is actually practical for day-to-day life with horses.
Exactly. And that's where we start looking at the barn itself. Is there water in the barn? Is it frost-free? Because if you're handling buckets through the snow and ice in the middle of winter, that gets old pretty quickly.
And once you've dealt with enough winters, you realize very quickly how important that convenience becomes.
Absolutely. And that doesn't just apply inside the barn. You also want to look at the outdoor access as well. Are there frost-free hydrants in the paddocks? Is water easily accessible year-round? These systems seem small, but when you're walking the property, they can become very important once you're living there day to day.
For sure. Makes total sense. So once the water systems make sense, the next thing buyers naturally focus on is whether the barn is actually functional for their operation.
Exactly. And this is where people sometimes confuse appearance with functionality. A barn can look great aesthetically, but it still needs to work properly for the horses and the owner. We're looking at things like, are the stalls properly sized? Are they matted? What's under the matting? Do they have enough stalls for your needs? Is there good ventilation without creating drafts? Ventilation is critical. You do want airflow, but you don't want horses standing in cold air movement during the winter.
And it's funny, people often focus on how a barn looks aesthetically, but the functionality side is what really affects your day-to-day experience.
You're absolutely right. And that functionality goes well beyond just stalls and turnout. You also need to look at things like tack storage and feed rooms. Are they dry? Are they secure? Are they functional? Because moisture and feed do not mix, and neither do rodents and poor storage.
And beyond the property itself, there's also the question of what surrounds a property, because owning a horse means relying on a whole network of services.
You are absolutely right, and that support network becomes a much bigger factor than many buyers initially realize. Things like large animal vets, farriers, feed stores, reliable hay suppliers. These aren't luxuries, they're essentials. And proximity matters. You don't want to be an hour away from dependable service when something urgent comes up.
And I imagine that becomes even more important for people who are actively competing or training regularly.
Most definitely. If you are competing, these become even more important. Is the property within a reasonable distance of shows, training facilities, coaching? Because long hauling times add up, they get tired, both in cost and wear and tear on your horses.
Now, beyond the buildings and logistics, let's talk about the land itself, because there's another area where buyers can really underestimate what's required.
That's exactly right. It's not just about having acreage, it's about whether the land is actually functional and manageable for horses. There are general recommendations for how much pasture you need per horse, and more importantly, how that pasture is managed. We're looking for things like, is there enough space? Are there multiple paddocks for rotation? Healthy grass growth? Rotation is key. Without it, you will quickly destroy your paddocks.
And even if a pasture looks healthy on the surface, that doesn't necessarily mean it's safe for horses.
Another really great point, and this is something that gets overlooked more than people realize. What is actually growing in those paddocks? There are a number of plants that can be toxic to horses. This includes black walnut. Exposure can trigger acute laminitis, sometimes within as little as 10 or 12 hours. Red maple. The wilted or dried maple leaves are highly toxic and can destroy red blood cells, leading to severe anemia and potential death. Milkweed. Milkweed contains cardiac toxins that can affect the nervous and cardiovascular system, causing colic and tremors or respiratory distress. Ragwort causes cumulative liver damage over time, and horses may not be symptomatic until the damage is advanced and irreversible. Other toxic plants include things like buttercup, yew, foxglove, bracken fern, wild cherry, nightshade. If any of those are present on the property, they need to be identified, properly managed, or removed.
This is certainly a lot to consider. Another thing buyers tend to underestimate is fencing, especially the cost of replacing or upgrading it properly.
Absolutely. And fencing isn't just about marking boundaries. It's a major safety concern for your horses. So we would be looking at things like the type of fencing, the condition it's in, safety, because not all fencing is suitable for horses. For example, page wire or woven wire fencing can become dangerous if a horse gets a hoof or leg caught in it. And repairs or full replacement can become very expensive very quickly.
And if the property has riding facilities, there's another major consideration that people outside the horse world often don't fully understand, and that's footing.
Absolutely. And footing isn't just about performance, it's a major safety issue as well. Poor footing can lead to injuries and training limitations. So when you're evaluating an arena, whether it be indoor or outdoor, we're always looking at the base, drainage, and surface material, because the quality of the footing can have a major impact on both the horse's soundness and the overall usability of the arena.
So when you put all this together, it really becomes clear that buying an equestrian property is very different from buying a typical rural home.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why understanding the practical side of these properties is so critically important. A property can look beautiful on the surface, but if it doesn't function properly, or for both you and your horses, those issues can become very expensive very quickly. The goal is finding a property that not only looks the part, but actually works the way it needs to.
And that's really why working with someone who understands these properties, such as Michael, makes a difference.
100%. So when you understand what to look for from the beginning, you can avoid a lot of unnecessary expenses and frustration, and focus on enjoying the property and the lifestyle that comes along with it.
If you're thinking about buying or selling an equestrian property in Simcoe County or anywhere in Ontario, reach out anytime.
And if you found this helpful, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow along for more videos just like this.
We'll see you at the next one.
Take care, everyone.